Hello, podcast fam. I am thrilled to share some exciting news. My book, So Grow Lead, is officially live on Amazon. This book is more than just my story of starting a nonprofit and building a peanut butter factory in Malawi. So trust me, the ups and downs of that journey are worth the read. It's also packed with practical strategies to help nonprofit leaders like you tackle challenges with clarity, courage, and a whole lot of heart. If you've ever wondered how to turn your vision into reality, navigate the inevitable hurdles, and build something meaningful, whether in your organization or in your own life, this book is for you. I'd be so grateful for your support in spreading the word. Grab your copy of So Grow Lead in the show notes and on Amazon today. Let's keep sowing seeds of impact together. Are you a nonprofit professional who's feeling overwhelmed and burnt out? Well, welcome to the Lead with Heart podcast. I am your host, Haley Cooper. On this podcast, we will share stories of leadership, courage, and empathy that'll help you learn to take care of yourself, your staff, organization, and community. You will hear from nonprofit leaders who have been in your shoes and have learned best practices to raise more revenue and make a greater impact. Let's thrive together. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Lead with Heart podcast. This is your host, Haley Cooper, and today I have Sonya Perez-Lauterbach on the podcast. And we actually met a week before recording this, and I just felt like we had so much synergistic energy. So I'm just so excited to have this conversation because she understands all things about emotions and executive coaching it and leadership. And let me tell you a little bit more about her before we dive into this wonderful conversation. Sonya is an idealist and change expert committed to creating a more beautiful and just world. I love that. Sonya is the creator of the Leadership Atlas, a holistic approach to leadership development that integrates the mental, emotional, and embodied aspects of leading. She began her career at an international microfinance fundraising organization. From prospect research, major events, program creation, and board development, she experienced the deep inner workings of the nonprofit world. The change, stress of wearing multiple hats, and navigating the weird power dynamics within nonprofits inspired her to find a better way to lead and grow organizations. She earned her Master's of Science in Learning and Organizational Change at Northwestern University, where she fell in love with leadership coaching. Through workshops and transformational one-on-one coaching, Sonya empowers motivated change agents to move from burnout and self-doubt to leading with confidence and clarity. Her practice leverages research-based coaching methods, neuroscience, psychology, and many insights gained from personal breakthroughs and mental shifts to help others lead and live with more joy and ease. She knows that when a leader feels better, they lead better, creating healthy, more effective, and sustainable organizations. Sonya is a bicultural Chicana who loves being in nature, global travel, and learning from her two children and husband, David. She's currently located on the ancestral land of the Dakota and Ojibwa people, also known as Minneapolis, Minnesota, but coaches clients worldwide. Well, thank you so much, Sonya, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, we had so much fun meeting you last week, so I'm excited to be able to share our conversation.
So can you talk a little bit more about some of the challenges that you talk about it a little bit in your bio, but the stress of wearing multiple hats? I think all of us as nonprofit leaders can relate to that. So how did you go from being that in-house person that was wearing all those hats to discovering that one, there was an answer and a way that you could provide some solutions for people who are in the depths of that stress and burnout?
Yeah, it was actually an intern of mine that was getting her master's, and she was doing an internship at this organization. And she was telling me more about her program, being in learning and organizational change. And I was like, there's a program to improve how you do org change. And at that point, we'd done multiple org changes and trying to create culture change and all of this stuff within the nonprofit. So yeah, I visited one class and was blown away by the tools on how to improve team dynamics. And I just knew, I never thought I wanted to go back to school, but I was like, I have to learn this stuff. So I was really grateful that I had the opportunity to join the program, and it was very human centric. And it was really just a great place to connect with colleagues in that space from Google and Facebook and AMX who had learning divisions in the whole organization. It was like a division within HR that also did employee training. And I know people that are listening are like, wow, if I had had a moment of training, let alone a whole department to help train me in the work that I'm supposed to do. So I learned about the growth mindset and just shifted the way I thought about work. Whereas like before, school was for learning and work was, I don't know, to prove yourself. And as I read some of the articles, realized how much defensiveness and like fear that I'd brought to the organization and to my work because I didn't know how to do it. But how would I have known how to do it? Right? Life is about learning and growing, and that you can actually have a mindset that inspires, that is like energy versus all the fear of trying to hide what you don't know. So that was a pretty big shift in my life during that grad program. And then I also got coaching as a part of the program and realized that there was support in just helping me rethink how I was approaching problems and how different narratives that I was holding about who I was impacted the way that I showed up. So many layers. I think each class I was just like, this has to be brought back to the nonprofit sector so that we can grow and not carry so much exhaustion and stress.
Yeah, I know. I definitely agree. And I think there is a lot of fear in nonprofits, that it's a lot of valid fear, right? Like fear that if I don't show up for my job, if I don't answer this phone call, someone's life is on the line. I've talked about this on my other podcast. Or fear that if I don't answer this phone call from a donor, they're not going to write me a check. Like there is a lot of valid fear, but I think a lot of times we don't know what to do with that fear. So can you talk a little bit more about like how you can personally do it yourself to understand that fear? And we'll talk a lot about emotions throughout this podcast episode, and its organizations provide space for that fear that is valid, but sometimes we don't know what to do with it or how to navigate it.
Yeah, I think that acknowledging it is a great starting point. And when I think about fear, I think about the nervous system. What actually is happening in my body when I say I'm feeling fear, and identify them as sensations on my body. And emotion being energy in motion on my body. And so when I feel like, okay, my heart gets tight, and so you're understanding the sensations that are happening in that fear. So even just like bringing your mind back to this is a physical thing. This is not who I am, right? And then also understanding what happens with the brain when we're in that fight or flight or fawn energy. We're not using our full frontal cortex. We're like not actually accessing our whole brain. And so while it might be valid that you're feeling fear, you actually want to calm your system so that you can respond more appropriately, respond more creatively and more effectively. So I know that I think it was a master class, a woman who taught the Navy SEALs, I think. She was talking about what they do, and obviously very fearful situations, is working to calm their nervous system. And so even being like, how dangerous is this situation? And reminding yourself that it's not like worst case scenario, like it's not the end of the world, right? And learning how to zoom out and be like, okay, a couple emails that aren't sent out, like what's going to happen, right? Rather than staying in that intense energy of fear and not being able to respond with the best creativity, with the best energy that we're actually wanting to come across with for our organization.
Yeah, I love that perspective. And I feel like a lot of people don't understand. So we can talk a little bit more about what calming your nervous system looks like. Because you're right. Like when we are in fear and high stress, and stress isn't always bad. We were designed for stress in acute situations. Like when you were a caveman and you had to run from an animal, right? That kind of stress is okay. But I think so much of our life is in that chronic stress state. And that's when you start seeing the physical signs of stress. You start getting sick. And so it does come down to regulating our nervous system. And I think a lot of people, when they are deemed burnout, that's the
Yeah.
end stage because their system has been so unregulated. And I had someone in my family who was experiencing extreme burnout, and he was like, well, what do I need to do? And I'm like, you literally don't need to do anything. You just need to learn how to regulate your nervous system. And I feel like a lot of people think that is daunting. So can you talk a little bit more about, we can get into the neuroscience a little bit because I love I love the neuroscience aspect of the sympathetic and parasympathetic system and how to activate the parasympathetic system when you are in that heightened state.
Yeah, I think that the one thing that I encourage people to start with is the compassion. Because when you start beating yourself up for being in that state, then the bear that you feel like is attacking, whether that's your email list or this giant proposal, and then you say, oh no, I'm supposed to regulate my nervous system. And then you're like, the threat comes from internal, beat ourselves up from the inside. And so I think it's really helpful to just be like, yeah, I am feeling this way. I'm feeling concerned right now and acknowledging it. And then there's knowing that if you've been in a place of chronic stress, that your brain actually might be addicted to those chemicals that continue to course through your body when you have stress, right? And you're just used to always being on and always problem solving. And so it can feel really unsettling to try to just sit. And like I've had people where we just start with 60 seconds of breathing. What does that feel like to just focus on my breath for 60 seconds? And there's a couple, I would say, like maybe the easiest thing is the box breathing, where you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, release for 4 seconds, and then hold again for 4 seconds. So it creates this space just simply with your breath. Another thing is actually drinking water can help, because taking time to drink water means that you're not in the midst of running away from from the threat. So it helps your brain say, okay, I'm okay to drink. I'm sure that people listening have had those days where they just go from one thing to the next thing and they like forgot to eat, like they didn't actually get up to eat. So if you know that you have a stressful week, what does that look like to schedule in your lunch to make sure that that's a priority, not just because you want a lunch break, because you know that that moment of sitting, maybe it's like walking outside and getting your lunch or just sitting down away from your computer, that's helping your brain tackle all the other things for the rest of your day. So it's actually a priority to take those breaks.
Yes, I totally agree. Because when I was a director of development, I would literally just be eating and writing my emails and calling people while I'm like in between bites because I didn't feel like I had the time. There wasn't enough time in the day to get things done, right? I had to work through my lunch break. And then I started to take walking breaks because I needed to move. Because again, you feel it in your body. And I was like getting antsy. And I felt like that opened it up to once I was able to move my body and kind of like release some of that stress, I was able to be more creative and come up with solutions because I took that time for myself. And I think we were talking last week a little bit about self-care. And I've told you a little bit about how on my journey, how my idea of self-care has changed a little bit from like getting massages and pedicures and manicures and all of that, which is all well and good. But I would love to know your perspective on self-care and what that means for a nonprofit professional when the world tells you self-care is selfish.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing to ask ourselves is like, what narratives are we holding about self-care? The narrative that it's selfish or that it's consumerism, go buy yourself another latte, or whatever it is that you feel like, ugh, is there something that makes you think that's not for me? What is that? And just acknowledge that those are narratives that we hold. And sometimes it's even just from like family culture of work hard, play hard, but we never rest. That's one thing that has been great. And it's served me very well to have a very strong work ethic. And I do work hard, but it's taken years for me to also value rest to the point where I can enjoy it. So that's an element of what are the narratives that I hold about self-care? And then the second is what actually energizes me. So like thinking about it is a way of filling up your cup versus what other people say it's going to fill up their cup. It might be different. And even taking the time to discover that. We are humans. We're actually not machines, but sometimes we actually give more care to machines, like rebooting them or giving them system updates or whatnot, than we do ourselves.
Yeah, I agree. And athletes literally prioritize their rest day. It makes them a better performers. Like the best athletes in the world rest because they know that their bodies cannot handle the chronic stress of performing over and over again, even practicing. Like I always remember when I ran in college, like we would have weeks every 4 to 5 weeks, we would have weeks where we would like barely run. And which sounds like illogical when you're a runner, right? And you're so used to running miles on end. But like our coach knew that in order to perform well in a meet, you had to rest your body. You couldn't just continue to press on and press on. Because if you do, your body will show up in sports, you'll get injured. And I've had friends that are my age that have had chronic health conditions flare up because of the amount of stress that they're carrying on their body. And so I think I love that idea of self-care being your own thing. Because I remember a couple months ago, I went to get a massage with some friends and my husband was like, "Are you relaxed?" And I was like, "Honestly, I'm not relaxed from the massage. I'm relaxed from the conversation I had with my friends during lunchtime." That is the kind of self-care that I needed, was like talking with other mom friends, just being around other mom friends and colleagues rather than someone like, I don't know, massage. Massage it's for each person. But yeah, that's where I was at with my self-care. And you mentioned, I want to go back a little bit. So you mentioned a little bit in the beginning about your experience with change in organizations. And I know that a lot of local organizations, to me, and I think this is across the globe with all companies, like there has been a lot of change. And there is a lot of change in nonprofits. I was just talking with someone that every 12 months fundraisers leave and 12 to 18 months. And there's obviously the quiet quitting and whatnot. So how do you navigate and coach people through that change? Because I think I've been through that and it wasn't navigated very well. And so now what I know with my own EMC process, I know, but I'm like, I wish I could go back and navigate a team. So how do you coach people through that? Because obviously it is very emotional. It's frustrating. It's confusing. People don't always have all the answers.
Yeah, I actually have a workshop called Thriving in Transition where I share a number of different models around change and transitions and just like frame of mind to like understand, oh, what's happening. But one of them that I'll share with you is William Bridges' transition model. And he has a really helpful, I think it's Managing Transition Field Guide book. And I think there's like millions of copies sold, so you'd probably be able to find it pretty easily. But the understanding transition, that there's always a beginning, a middle, and an end. Sorry, I flip that. So like the change happens and then you go through this transition before it actually takes root. And so you have to start with the ending, acknowledging what's changing. And then there's like this middle zone where the new hasn't fully emerged. And then eventually you'll get to the new place of being. And it's like a swervy line where at the beginning there's more letting go that has to happen, but also you're in that in-between zone. And obviously like there'll be pieces of that new beginning to emerge, and then that new beginning becomes larger and larger. And just acknowledging that you're going to have emotions associated with all of those. You're going to have excitement for the new beginning. You're going to have overwhelm or confusion. And then you're also going to have moments of grief. Even if you're glad about the change, there's things that you're going to grieve, like predictability or certain colleagues that have left. So understanding like what you're letting go of in the change and understanding what's being taken away if you don't have control over the change can be really helpful. If it's a colleague that you used to always depend on that is leaving for different types of conversation or different information, just being more aware of what's happening in that transition can be really helpful. So that's one of the models. But also, as you go through that, bringing awareness to like your thoughts about it. Are you thinking this is going to be good, or are you thinking this is horrible? Because that's going to impact how you feel about it too. And trying to be able to see some of the positive things about maybe what's happening. understanding your emotions through it, and then also your embodied response. If you feel like you're being abandoned as people leave, that's going to like trigger a lot of different things for you. And it's going to be hard to be productive or hard to do your general job. And so just acknowledging kind of those three levels of what's happening in my body, what's happening in my emotions, and what's happening in my thoughts about this transition, bringing awareness to it can give you your power back.
Imagine a fundraising partner that not only helps you raise more money, but also supports you in retaining your donors. A partner that helps you raise funds both online and on location so you can grow your impact faster. That's DonorBox, a comprehensive suite of tools, services, and resources that give fundraisers just like you a custom solution to tackle your unique challenges, helping you achieve the growth and sustainability your organization needs. Helping you help others. Visit donorbox.org to learn more. I love that. And it goes back to the neuroscience too, of it literally can relax your amygdala, right? So if you have those just acknowledging it or naming it in those heightened stress change environments, then you can start to think of the next step or think a little bit more logically. And I would love to know your thoughts on during those times of transition, what are key elements for leadership to practice in terms of emotional intelligence when they're leading organizations through a change? What are some of the key components that they can lead people through that? It's not always scary. Sometimes it's good, but hopefully most of the time in change it's good. But yeah, how can leaders really lead people through that?
Well, I think there's a couple things for the leaders to think about. First, is it something that you're moving towards, or is it like an uncontrollable a circumstance that you didn't choose? Being able to understand if it's something that you're moving towards, like really explaining the why and the why it will benefit like all of your different team members and the different stakeholders, and think widely about the stakeholders, because that can help you craft the type of change that you're going to lead, and really framing it in a way, not just for you or not just for the donor, but really looking across the spectrum of your stakeholders and mapping it out. How is this impacting them? Or how could this? And also integrating feedback too of what that change could be. So that's one where a leader is leading the change effort. Now, you'd mentioned employees leaving and like fundraisers leaving all the time. I think it's really important for leaders to start asking why. And are we having the conversations and creating the space for people to stay? And that might mean doing work differently in a profound way, changing what support you're giving your fundraisers, changing the goals, or how you talk about overhead. If professional development is just an overhead piece that needs to be minimized, and your fundraisers are burnt out and aren't getting the support they need and aren't getting the tools they need to do their work, or they don't feel like they're being heard. I think if you have people leaving often, begin to ask, what's happening here in this space? How can we create a community where people feel seen and empowered and energized to do their work? And I say, I help leaders not accidentally make toxic workplaces. Because sometimes like an executive director is driven by passion and commitment, and often has a personality that's get it done kind of personality, and they continue to move forward at a rate that maybe your team isn't all on the same board, or they aren't feeling supported in different ways. So doing that introspection of like, how am I showing up as a leader that creates safety for people to give their best work, that is empowering people to do their best work? And I've seen some articles and people talking about sabbaticals within nonprofit. Short term, that might not seem sustainable, but what if you kept your fundraisers on for 15 years, 5 years, even 2 years. What is our standard and how expensive would it be to invest in a sabbatical or some more radical ways of caring for your employees that in the long run keeps them on board? Like, how much would that actually save your organization? And how do we have conversations with our donors about making our organizations places where people don't want to leave?
Yes, I love that. And I had another podcast episode with a local organization, formerly OC Human Relations, now Groundswell, that is literally doing that. They are pretty much I don't want to say demanding because that sounds bad, but demanding that their staff take 5 weeks of rest, and they're at least paying them what it costs to live in Orange County, which is like around $75,000, $80,000 as the base salary, because they found that they couldn't keep their people here because it was too expensive and they were paying minimum wage for the entry level jobs. And they also are providing those sabbaticals and are able. So if you want to go listen to how to do that, listen back to that episode, because I asked that question from a fundraising perspective, and it was just really honest conversations. And high cost turnover equals high cost fundraising. So it makes sense to the board to want to invest in their people, because in the long run, people aren't ROI. That sounds bad, but like in the long term, the ROI on your mission and the delivery of your mission is so much better when you take that time to invest in your people, because at the end of the day, they're part of your community as well. They deserve just as much as support as anyone else. And so I love that perspective and the questions that you're asking, that then people can go take back to their organizations and ask those same questions.
Yeah. And it takes a little bit to ask those questions. We have to get out of that fight and flight mode, right? We have to say, well, what if this isn't a problem? Like, how I had someone who is a fundraiser and I'm going on sabbatical or a leave, and how is this not hurting the organization? We talked about, well, what does this produce something good in that everybody in the organization sees themselves as a part of the fundraising team? Yeah, like sometimes we just are so hyper fixated on the problem. And yeah, one of the questions I love to ask is, what if this isn't a problem? Gets us to begin to think about seeing it from a different perspective and gives us some more creative solutions.
And I think that's where they can benefit bringing in an executive coach like you, right? Because sometimes we get so stuck in our problems. And like you said, we can't see that higher 30,000 level view of what's actually going on. So it's always helpful to bring in a third person to help ground you and calm your nervous system, and then be able to navigate what those next steps are. Because there isn't always a right on solution, right? But there are ways that you can navigate the current situation and decide what those next steps are.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that keeps us in fear often is this belief that there's a right answer. And so we get paralyzed and end up getting into that fear brain when we're looking for the perfect solution and saying, okay, I'm going to make a decision and I'm going to evaluate it and see how it goes. But I think that sometimes nonprofits don't feel like they have the luxury of that. Well, these are donor dollars, and what if I make a mistake? And so I think that's where we trip ourselves up. And I think it also is a part of the philanthropic community to say, we want to fund innovative solutions. And that includes making mistakes. Businesses and tech, like, mistakes and fails are a part of the strategic plan of get there faster, to try stuff. And I think that sometimes nonprofits we get stuck when we think that there's a right answer and that we're responsible to have a right answer versus responsible to take action and evaluate and move forward.
Hey there, podcast family. If you're like me and deeply committed to improving your leadership skills and fostering better connections with your team, I've got something truly amazing to share with you. I'm proud to introduce the EMC Masterclass, something I talk about often as a certified trainer. It's an incredible program developed by the renowned Dr. Lola Gershfield, an organizational psychologist and corporate emotional connection expert. You might remember her from a podcast episode where she shared invaluable insights into the world of emotional connection. Dr. Gershfeld's EMC Leaders courses are designed for anyone working with people, whether you're a manager, supervisor, team leader, educator, coach, mentor, or a team member. This program is truly for everyone looking to enhance their communication and collaboration skills to raise more revenue for their mission. Now, let me tell you why the EMC Masterclass is a game changer. Dr. Gershfeld's groundbreaking emotional connection process has been integrated into top universities' curriculum and recognized by international organizations like ICF, HRCI, and SHRM. Humans are wired to seek emotional safety, and when we feel safe, we're more likely to take risks, share innovative ideas, and collaborate effectively. The EMC process is the catalyst for creating that emotional safety within your team. The virtual EMC Masterclass consists of 8 modules with 4 hours of expertly recorded material, 13 quizzes to reinforce your learning, and a workbook filled with activities for offline practice and something I still refer to daily. Ready to become an emotional connection master? Dr. Gershfeld is offering an exclusive detail for our podcast listeners. Use the code LEADWITHHEART to enjoy a generous 10% discount on the EMC Masterclass. Head over to emcleaders.com and enroll in the EMC Masterclass today. Yeah, I can totally relate as a former recovering perfectionist of that paralysis that you get when you want to get it right. And I think it was in an Adam Grant's book, I think the original's talking about how most successful people fail a lot of times before they become successful, and like how some organizations have built the most successful organizations have built that into the model of their company culture, and that's how they become successful.
Yeah. And that, I think, is a mind shift that a leader needs to take both for themselves and then create that space for other people to make mistakes. Yeah. Like I was talking to one person today, and she was like feeling like she always had to be available to respond to her direct reports. And we kind of like pulled back this idea of maybe not responding right away is actually going to help her direct reports improve their decision making. And I was like, so what if mistakes are made? And talking through that of, oh, okay, I'm okay with them making mistakes because that's how they're going to grow. And just having that frame of mind versus like when you're operating just at 1,000,000 miles and not thinking about it, then you think, oh, your brain's going to offer you, it's better for me to be 100% available to them, answer their questions to avoid any mistakes. And then you end up getting super burnt out because you're 100% available, doing everybody's job. And so it's just like taking those moments to zoom out and being like, okay, how can I create a culture that I want to work at that is rejuvenating to me and empowers my employees to get better at decision making and fail for themselves, fail forward? And how do we be okay with that?
Yeah, I love that. What are some questions? I don't have the book right in front of me, but there's another person and one of my mentors, Dr. Lil Gershfeld, who is the founder of the EMC Leaders, has a book out about 5 key questions for like bonding conversations. And one of the topics in those 5 keys is if someone fails, like how, or if someone makes a mistake, instead of pointing it out and being like, oh my God, you made a mistake. Like, how can we take a step back and ask questions that lead to a more positive future and not like necessarily shame someone for a mistake? But like, how do you coach people through as a leader to navigate that and ask generative questions around failing and what you were just talking about?
Yeah, I think it comes in the relationship as we're working through different things. What comes up for you when we talk about making mistakes? And for myself, it's funny, like my sister and I were talking about making mistakes and just this fear of making mistakes. And like her husband brought in this song that he learned as a child that was like, oops, I made a mistake. That's all. And he found it on YouTube. And I guess it was like on Sesame Street or something like that. And both of us had this like I don't know, internal like sigh of that's all. That's it. And it's depending on the household you grew up in, and maybe it's a conversation that you had with a teacher that like made you believe that mistakes were not okay. And I promise you that it was not your like I realize I do this with my own children where I'm like, the milk spill, like my nervous system gets activated because the little child in me is, you aren't allowed to make mistakes. And so then I see a mistake happen and like my response, and just realizing, oh, this is coming from a deeper place that I believe that mistakes were not okay. And not because my parents
Mhm.
I wasn't in a loving home. It's just these neurological responses sometimes, but also to be able to say, it's okay. That's just a mistake. That's all. And rewiring the way that we respond to mistakes. And I'm still working on it. I think becoming a parent, you realize all of these crazy little triggers you've got.
I'm like, oh, fall down. Oh, it's okay.
And it's, oh, because the house will get messy or whatever it is. Like, it's funny as we realize, am I okay when mistakes happen?
Yeah.
And what does that feel like to move forward and still say, I'm okay? And then you end up getting in the conversation of realizing, oh, actually, my value isn't tied to what I produce.
Oh, so good.
And it's, oh, I might cognitively know that, but what does that feel like to be like, actually embody that? I really, my value is not what I produce. And that's, we've been told, I think, through capitalism and our society that like we are valued based on what we produce. And it's crazy. So many organizations are so much about elevating the human spirit and that we all have dignity. But then we don't give that to ourselves sometimes. And so if we can be like, oh, actually, I'm okay. I'm not what I produce. That gets us out of the fight and flight mindset. And we get to be like, wow, but I'm a human and I'm creative and I'm passionate about this work. And I enjoy producing things. I enjoy producing events. I enjoy producing, whether it's a podcast or email that gets to elevate this cause in a cool new way. Like that energy is so much more sustainable. And so it's like this deeper shift. I say it's holistic and transformational leadership coaching, where it is that internal like shift of, oh, when I'm okay, then my direct reports are okay. Like we're not, it's going to be, it's just a mistake. How do we move forward with our creative? How do we fix for this? How do we like, when we're not in a like, my identity and my value is on the line, if that's not on the line, then we can just be creative. We can just figure this out. We run a new report and we don't spend the emotional and mental energy feeling that shame.
That is so good. And I just so appreciate you for just normalizing so many of these feelings. And so I hope that people on this podcast can feel that they're not
Yeah.
alone. Like these feelings are normal. And I think it's just so beautiful that you just walked us through like an executive coaching process of like how to navigate some of these feelings and emotions and thoughts and where to go. And I would just love to end on how people can, do you have any other tips on how people can move from that burnout, stressed out state to more ease and joy? Because I feel like everyone, like you said, they're not human doings, they're human beings and they deserve ease and joy. And so, how can people start to embody
Yeah.
that?
I'd say the first thing is like a small step is a step in the right direction, right? It's a 1% shift can create change. And so whether that's 60 seconds of breathing between meetings, choosing to schedule your lunches. So there are like these small little things that you can do to say, I am valuable and worthy of a minute. And maybe a mental jump, like a mental trick would be like, and this is going to help me produce more. Like the goal isn't, maybe the ultimate goal is like disconnecting what you produce from your value. And then also get help. I do free discovery calls where we map out what would that look like to move towards ease and joy. And CEOs of corporations, they all have coaches. every successful athlete, like for every athlete they have coaches. And I think normalizing getting a coach within this sector is really important. Bringing in your work for teams to better understand your emotions. It's not like the work of an organization is not just spreadsheets. It is these human interactions and like the way, I mean, we know that donors give when they feel connected. Like, what does connected mean? And like better understanding those emotions and better understanding the energy that we're putting out in the world. Yeah, go ahead and get help. And if your board is, well, we don't know about that, there's research and there's around how impactful getting a coach can be, and that it's not selfish, that it is actually it's about sustainability. You probably have some organizations will have things about being sustainable and stuff. And really, yes, we want to protect the planet, but we also need to protect our energy and our health and how our employees are engaged. It's such a wise investment in my perspective.
Yeah, I'll have to share an infographic with you that my mentor and the founder of the EMC Leaders Process shared with me, because it's some crazy amount of money that people are losing because their people are turning over and they're not investing in emotions. I don't even know. It's like some big number, but I'll probably be writing about it on my LinkedIn soon. But she shared this like infographic with me that helped break, because I was like, organizations and boards want to see ROI. They want to see a return on investment. And so especially boards, like they want to see those outcomes. So she shared this infographic with me that, broke it down with my services. And it was like a 2,000% return on investment just by studying how much you're losing when you lose an employee based on how much I'm charging for my services. So it's like some crazy amount. I'm like, I'm going to use this and share it all. But anyways, yeah, I love that you need to invest that time and you need to learn to embody that joy. And I would love to know, I love asking this question, but where are you finding joy these days?
That's my favorite question. Well, I am in Minnesota, and it's summer right now. And being outside, I planted a whole bunch of flowers that are like cut flowers. And so being in the season where there are flowers that are blooming and then cutting them and bringing them into the house, being in a place where there's 4 seasons really has helped me like be more mindful of what is present and like allowing myself to be present to enjoy the berries that are in the grocery store and just really soaking up summer. There's an element of, I know winter is coming.
I know it's already August tomorrow. Oh, goodness.
But yeah, being present and being able to be grateful for the flowers that are blooming and knowing that there are different seasons for different times. So just soaking into the joy of summer blooms.
I love that. And you mentioned that people can book a free discovery call. Where else can people find you and follow along? I know that I've been following you on LinkedIn and love all your content, but share where people can find you.
Yeah, I am on LinkedIn and I am on Instagram. I do different reels there. My handle is I am Sonya Perez. And I also have an email list with, when you join the email list, you get a 5 days rejuvenation. So it's just a prompt in your inbox to breathe. So maybe you just need that. Like you're like, oh, actually, I'm so hooked to my email. Just a moment of refresh in your inbox. And I talk about different emotions and different reflection questions. So people can join my email list or find me on LinkedIn and Instagram.
Awesome. We will link to all of that. And I've been following along with the 5-day series. And I loved in the one when you talked about emotions are energy in motion. And you mentioned something about emotional ninja. And I was like, okay, now we have to be friends. But thank you so much for being on this podcast. I'm going to listen back and I just have so much to think about now. And just this different perspective has just been such a breath of fresh air. Thank
you so much for this podcast. I think this is exactly what the industry needs, that permission to lead with heart, because we already are. And so it's like, how do we bring in some real tools and encouragement to lead the way that we feel authentic and empowered? So thank you for creating this community.
If you have valued these stories or learned something from what you've heard, please share this podcast episode or follow me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for your support, and together we can build a better community and world.